Even need this because you've seen this 100 times. We ready?
I'm ready. Just
All right.
speak up.
So I just had a handout. So, okay, hi Anna.
Come over this side, Ann.
Come on in.
We're going to be looking this way.
Okay.
Here's a handout.
Can I have that?
Yes, of course.
Yay.
This is our PowerPoint tips and tricks handout that we use. Because I think when I started putting this presentation together, I think a lot of folks know the basics in and outs of PowerPoint. Maybe you don't, but the point is all the fancy stuff is really stuff you shouldn't be using because it looks unprofessional. So we're going to talk a little bit about PowerPoint, but we're also going to talk about some of the things that Rachel and Brendan and I coach with like mental health first aid instructors on their presentation skills to help them be successful and engage their audiences. So I'm going to talk about MHFA and PowerPoint, and I'm going to talk about some good ideas for presentations. Because how many of you have spent a room where someone reads the slides? Yeah. Anybody else had really rotten experiences being in the audience? Any examples other than someone reading the slides?
They just click through too fast, so I can't even read the slides, and they don't give us handouts with the...
They don't give you handouts. That's good. Anything
It was
else?
difficult to read because it's just too busy and over decorated, whatever. So
You're so smart.
Speaking of professionals.
You hit one of the top 12 mistakes of people who do PowerPoint presentations is too much text on the same page. So this is
Or it's too tiny and you can't, like
Or
it's
too
a graph or something.
Yes.
You can't see it, which I've done that too.
Yes.
So I've inflicted that as well as received it.
so we have some wisdom in the room, which I figured we did anyway. So, whoops. Let's see. There we go. Now it's
When
My
I can't
laptop
see
is on.
anything.
but my
Oh,
screen is
Is the
not.
screen not on?
No.
Let's see. Might have turned itself off because we were waiting.
So a good thing in any presentation is to check your AV ahead of time. And even when you do check it like we did today, because I got here early and we loaded up the presentation and I made sure everything worked and the clicker worked and everything, stuff still happens. So on the 21st, we're doing a webcast for instructors about what happens when things blow up.
That would be good to know, because sometimes you can't control that.
Sometimes you can't control that. I'll share a story, because one time I was doing a presentation at the hospital I worked at in Mexico, Missouri, in an auditorium of approximately 300 people. And it had one of these big projectors that came down out of the ceiling. It was about 10 times the size of that one. And right in the middle of it, the bulb blew. And it required a service call and $500, which 20 years ago was a lot of money, for somebody to replace that. So we wielded a television and they had 300 people sitting around the television to watch the videos just to be able to finish the presentation. So you do what you can. So we're going to cover some common mistakes made in PowerPoint presentations. Today we're going to do some tips on effective and engaging presentations. So here's top 12. This is what Anna just totally mentioned. Too much text is one of the things that people tend to make on PowerPoint presentations. So if you got to the end, you're doing pretty well, but most of the time people put too much text in their presentations. So you really shouldn't go with a font that's really any smaller than this. And if you've got that much text, break it into 2 slides. It's not difficult. So using weird fonts, more than one font, sizes on a slide. There is an UMSL style guide that's on the website if you want to take a look at that, because it does have some prescriptions. Rachel and I were in a training once, and it was the author of a book that's used quite a bit in co-occurring treatment, and it was a preeminent person, and she literally had a slide that had 20 fonts and 20 different colors on it, and it was just, and I'm using the word literally. So it was, we crossed our eyes, and it really detracted from the impact of the presentation that she was doing. And it was a model for treatment that was evidence-based, that was working for people, and yet the presentation itself really undermined her own credibility. So the thing about presentations is don't overdo it, because people are spending more time looking at the color and the fonts than they are actually looking at the content of your material. So using more than one color or 2 font colors at a time, So having typos in your slids.
It's still
Kathy and Jeff
happens.
know me well enough to know that's probably what I typed first before I went back and corrected it because I'm the king of typos myself. And then the last thing, did you even notice that it said putting important stuff around the edges? You know, a lot of times you see stuff spread out, and if it's not going to fit, you need to readjust in terms of if it's graphs or things like that, or make sure that you've got your information kind of centralized where people are going to see it. So the other big C. I like that the reaction that I'm getting from the group, it completely reflects the material. So dark color text on dark backgrounds really doesn't work very well. There are some requirements for folks who have visual impairments that like black screen with white lettering. So if you're either using white with black letters or black with white letters, that's normally acceptable. But particularly with people with visual impairments, one of our co-workers, Rita, had to do a presentation where it was geared towards standards for people with visual impairments, which was black with white lettering. But traditionally we do white with black, just to make it simple.
So red and blue kind of, I mean, I think it has to be flashing, but that's like the seizure combination.
It is. It gives people a headache, and it does. It looks like it's vibrating.
Yeah.
So I did a presentation. I was doing a safety presentation for the staff at one point because they had to have our annual health and safety presentations, and I had call 911 in giant red letters, and it was blinking because I was really into custom animation at that point because it was fun. And after about 20 seconds, the whole group was like, "Turn it off! You're giving me a seizure." So, you know, there are things you don't really want to. Annoying people into learning is not really an effective strategy for doing presentations. It is an effective strategy for therapy. You know, you frustrate people into growth sometimes, but it's not an effective presentation. So blue text on a red background.
And
Yeah.
just a digression, you know, that the red background is really giving people a headache.
Yeah.
But the only people who would not notice this is people with Daltonism, the Dalton syndrome, because they do not recognize red. But that's a very narrow group.
Is that a
of
variation
people.
of
It's like
color blindness?
1%, yeah.
Okay.
So, have you heard about the Daltonism?
I have.
Yeah.
I'm colorblind.
Yeah. So,
And yet is one of the best graphic
but
artists we
that's
have
only
in place.
1% of the entire population.
Yeah, so you really want to, that's why black and white is not a bad idea. So those are some of the common mistakes that people make in presentations. I'm going to start talking about some of the mistakes that people make when they're presenting their material. So, you know, staring at the screen, you know, you're supposed to really connect with your audience.
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
No, that's quite all right.
Well, and just for the record, why Daltonism? Because Dalton, then that French revolutionary guy, he was colorblind. He didn't recognize yellow color and green and red. So that's why we had a Daltonism. Or
Interesting.
Dalton syndrome.
See, a little
Just-
history lesson
Just
for
for the
today.
record.
So utilizing your audience's expertise is a good way to engage people in your presentation too at the same time. So we talked about some of the common mistakes about people tend to make in PowerPoint in terms of their presentations. But I'm going to also look at some of the common mistakes that people make in their presentations. So staring at the screen, slides are supposed to supplement your presentation. You know, reading from the screen shows that you haven't practiced and that you don't necessarily know your material. And that also gets people to wonder if you actually know what you're talking about. So if you can know the material and be able to paraphrase the points that are on the screen, it shows that you know what you're talking about. Because, and we do this with MHFA instructors all the time. People will say, well, the book says, or well, the data says, or well, the slide says, which means I'm not sure if I believe that. And I have no confidence in the material that I'm presenting. And as an audience, you know, your response at that point is like, why should I be listening to this person? Because I don't even know if they're credible.
Ed,
Mm-hmm.
I think I should leave because
No, I like the discussion.
No,
Just be
because
aware we've got a half hour and then it's
you
Kelly's
made
turn.
an excellent point. However, speaking from my own experience,
Mm-hmm.
and people like me, coming from, you know, foreigners, they tend to overload the slides, not because they don't know what they talk about, but they feel more comfortable and confident, you know, having all of this. So they would just go point by point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes I listened to several presentations at Washington University given by foreigners.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Marcoux
Mm-hmm.
from Romania. She was like, she obviously she knows the psychiatry very well, and
Mhm.
she's a very successful practitioner. But you know, she told me like, you know, I feel so much more comfortable, you know. So in case
Sure.
if I need the words, I would just find it, you know. So that's.
Well, I
that's
think it's
one
a point of
way to
balancing your
yeah.
level of, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's a matter of balancing your effort. If it's a presentation you're going to do one time, you know, certainly some practice is appropriate, but you don't necessarily want to memorize the whole presentation. For something that you're going to be doing on a regular basis, let's say for like Rachel Winograd, who's got a presentation on opioids that she probably has done 20 times, it makes some sense for you to kind of streamline and memorize and really work on that presentation, because you're really working at making a change in the community as opposed to just presenting to a small group of people at a one-time event. So, you know, I understand that you need to balance your level of energy and effort, and kind of if you over-practice for one presentation, it might not be the best use of your time. So, but I totally understand what you're saying too, and it just, you know, what you're comfortable with. And the thing about presentations is the more you do it, the better practice that you have. I mean, the more you practice, the more
That's why I
comfortable
don't
you
do
are.
presentations, and
Yeah.
Kelly always try to, you know, it's like, you know, do it.
One of the common mistakes too I've seen really nervous presenters make is load up the first slide and then talk through all of their notes and never advance the slide. And then they're always talking 2 or 3 slides ahead, or occasionally they'll blank a screen, or they'll put the slide ahead and they'll be talking about the previous slide. So you really want to be talking about the slide that you're currently presenting on. So standing in front of the screen is difficult because people do that all the time. Or doing this, pointing to things at the screen, is really annoying. I'm not a big fan of laser pointers either, although some people tend to use them a lot. It doesn't really even work on this television, and it tends to draw cats. But one of the tricks that you can do is that you can blank the screen when you're walking in front of it, because it kind of depends on where you want the audience's eyes to be. If you want the audience to be listening to you as you're explaining something, then you don't want them staring at the screen. But if you want the material on the screen referencing what they're currently working on as a group, like an exercise or something, then you want to necessarily leave it up. The same happens if you've got people in your room up and moving around for an exercise, and they, because of the size of the room, some of them need to stand in front of the screen. Blank the screen, because otherwise, especially if it's a projector and not a television, they're going to be standing there and they're going to look like a police lineup. And I've seen that happen a number of times too, and it's really uncomfortable for people and can give them a bad experience. So, the other is animating stuff just because you can is really distracting. So Rachel and I had a really long discussion about animations, because I was still really pro animation when I got here, and I've learned that it's just glitz more than anything else, and it does nothing to advance the content that you're trying to present, and it really does kind of distract the material. Toggling in and out of presentations, you can embed videos into PowerPoint, and if you ever want to do that, let me know. I'd be happy to help you. I'm sure Kelly's an absolute expert at that. The only challenge we've had sometimes is they're a little slow to load because of the capabilities of the laptop and stuff. And even in mental health first aid, we toggle between a PowerPoint presentation and video all the time during the course of the class, because they've never embedded the video into the PowerPoint presentation.
And just, if I can throw it out there.
Yeah.
So there's also been, over the years, a struggle between Microsoft and Google. And so sometimes you can embed YouTubes, and sometimes you can't. And I think we're at a point now where you cannot with
Really?
PowerPoint. So YouTube is the easiest thing, and that's what a lot of people use in their presentations. And there's not really a super simple way to embed them in a PowerPoint, I think, currently. And so that becomes problematic. So people will put links on the page and then jump out to links, and then when they
They
try
can
to
do
jump
that.
back in, so.
One of the things that we do is we also, when we load up the PowerPoint, we load up the video too, because a lot of our stuff's either on a jump drive or on a DVD. And that way, you know, you can get right out of it and just go and play your video and not have to really spend a lot of time toggling between the two. Another point too is if I just sat on the, oh, no, of course now my clicker's not working.
Just click on your screen there.
There we go.
Click again till your little thing goes away on the bottom.
Oops. Let's just escape out of that. But if you happen to, see, for some reason,
Don't freak out.
oh, I'm not. Not at all. There we go. So if I lose my place in a slide deck, one of the great things about PowerPoint is you can just punch in a number, and hit enter, and it'll take you to that numbered slide. So if you know the slides of your number, because I was on slide 4, I believe, you can just punch in a number and go right to that slide instead of having to scroll through all the slides. One of my other favorite ones is F5, because people are always like, presentation, start at first. Just hit F5 and it takes you right to a new presentation from the first slide. Or if you're on a particular slide that you just edited, you can hit Shift F slide and it'll start the presentation from that particular slide too. And those are all on the cheat sheets there too. So we've got animating things, toggling in and out of presentations, using clip art. I only use clip art with emails to my friends, really, most of the time. So it's not necessary most of the time. Now, if you have pictures of a program that you're working with, that you're presenting, then that stuff's great because I think it really personalizes the experience. But everybody in the world has access to clip art, and there's really no point. And freaking out when something doesn't work. So using a clicker can be really helpful. I always make sure, if you don't have one, they're really inexpensive. They're only about $25 or $30. You buy your own. Kelly was kind enough to give them away at one spring training institute to all the presenters, which I thought was super cool. So it's really helpful, because otherwise you're either doing this yourself or you're constantly saying, please advance the next slide. So, like I said, blank the screen. There's usually a button on your clicker that'll blank the screen. You can also hit B and blank the screen, or you can hit a W and white it out. I don't really tend to white out screens because it's kind of a big bug light in the middle of the room a lot of times. So speak to your audience and not the screen, and just prepare and practice, because timing is important, because we're already at 20 minutes after and I still got a little bit to do. Test your equipment. I always bring a backup copy. So I used to burn things onto a CD, and then I'd have it on a jump drive, and then I'd put it on the desktop of my laptop, just because I was paranoid and I wanted to make sure that I had a copy of everything. Because sometimes jump drives get corrupted and things like that happen. So, and have some confidence in the material. The other thing I was going to talk about was planning your transitions, because I think one of the things that can help make a presentation smooth is really to connect the material as you move along. So we work a lot with instructors about connecting their material when they're co-presenting to the other presenters' material. So they would say, my co-presenter mentioned that mental health disorders are common. So we're going to find out how common they are, and that transition connects the material and helps really lead people upon that path of learning that you really want them to do, and to achieve the objectives that you have. So here are some of the tips on transitions between content and slides and things like that. So some of them are quite good. You may have heard of these. Has anybody heard of these before? You remember this stuff? All right, good. I'm glad I'm teaching you something new. So question, answer, bumps. We've said the mental health disorders are common. You might be wondering how common they are. So you're kind of posing a question and then kind of halfway answering that question at a time, which would connect the slides to the other slide. Or ask the audience what they know. So we've been talking about effective PowerPoint presentations. So think about the presentations that you've attended in the past. What's been really awful, or what's annoyed you most? And I heard some things from you, like too much text on a slide, that you already said. So you're connecting the material to the responses of the people that are in your group, and are able to really weave those two things together. It takes a little bit of skill, but it can make for a really, because I bet right now somebody is thinking, wow, I said that and it's on a slide, so I must be really smart. And it really brings people into the presentation. So the other thing I was going to add is now we're going to that, and now we're going to do an exercise, and now we're going to talk about this, and now we're going to talk about that. It's very chunky and blocky, and it really doesn't help your presentation feel smooth at all, and it feels like it's a bunch of disjointed pieces, but really connecting things together. So the other one, gosh, I learned this when we were starting to do assist training, some of the Socratic questioning. So what do you think the next thing we would be interested in? So really just kind of posing those general questions to help people move kind of across the learning plan that you've planned for them during the presentation. So for example, we've been talking a lot about mental health disorders. What do you think, what are you asking yourself in your head right now? And somebody, I'm sorry, I keep getting in your personal space. I need to move around a little bit. And somebody say, well, I really want to know what a mental health disorder is. And then you go right into an exercise where you're helping people define a mental health disorder. Those kinds of questions that you pose to the group to get them to think, to get them to kind of connect to the material. And the point is if you can't think of a good transition from one section to the other, chances are that your presentation is missing something. There's that kind of Grand Canyon in between two pieces of material, and you may need something that bridges the two pieces together. So for example, in this presentation, we talked about some of the common mistakes that people make in PowerPoint presentations, and then we also talked about some of the things that people can do to be effective presenters, which are really separate pieces, but connecting them together, as if you're doing this while you're doing this, helps make that presentation a little more effective. All right, so other tips for engaging your audience. If you can, greet and welcome people. Hi Liz, nice to have you. Glad you could make it. That's quite all right. One of the things that Disney consultants did when I worked in the hospital, they brought in consultants from Disney. If you showed up late, they made you sing in front of 400 or 500 people. So we're not going to do that.
That's not going to endear you to your audience.
Yeah, really.
It's a small world, go. No, so yeah, it's not about embarrassing people. It's about kind of bringing them into the learning experience more than anything else.
And if we get a French fries, we can just throw
wrong?
them. It's like, hey, and wait, Jeff,
Maybe.
The other thing that
I'm in
people
an
have,
excellent mood today. Goofy.
When
the other
you
thing
got
that
the
folks
coffee
have,
there,
I'm sorry,
I want some.
I'm trying to keep it on track
Smear
here.
off.
One of the things that people have trouble with sometimes is volume and pace. I know that when I am running short on time, or when I've had 5 cups of coffee, that I tend to talk too fast. And then as I'm running out of time, I also tend to talk louder. Jermaine had a really great way of saying this. It's kind of like you get into the William Tolliver chair, that kind of and you're trying to squeeze all this material into the end of your presentation. So if you're running out of time, you're better off cutting out material than you are about trying to squeeze it all in, because if you're going to sound like the Energizer Bunny, it's really just going to be this kind of buzzing sound that people are not going to have a chance to absorb any of that material. So pick the main points and stick to where you're at, and use a tone that is engaging and appropriate. Because if people are like, and here we are in table 342, subsection A, paragraph B, you see that we have done a cross blah 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 analysis, and by then people are snoring. So a little bit of inflection is nice. You don't want to come in like Quirky the Clown and jumping around the room, but at the same time a little bit of some enthusiasm can be fine. So when you ask for questions, one of the other ways to engage people is to thank them for your participation. And reminding people, oh, you said that earlier, that's really interesting. We're going to talk about that right now. So making them feel like what they're inputting into the conversation is important really can be helpful. Being non-judgmental. People say things sometimes. We know working in mental health that there's a lot of stigma out there, and people use words like nuts and crazy and commit and bunkers and all those other things. It's also, I always think of those as teaching opportunities for us to really start opening conversations with individuals about language and how we respect people, and that everyone's experiences can be different. So, did anybody had anyone in a presentation that was just really an insufferable know-it-all? The Hermione Grangers of the room, those of you that have watched Harry Potter, he referred to her as an insufferable know-it-all, which is one of my favorite phrases. So you can always redirect. So that's a really interesting point, but we haven't heard anything from this side of the room. Let's take a look over here and see what this table has to say. Thank you, that's an important part, but I want to make sure everybody else gets a chance to speak. Let's hear what they have to say. Okay, can we put that on hold because we need to really finish the material? You can redirect, you can stay on topic by saying, good point, I'd be happy to talk with you at the break, but there's some things that are really important I need to get through, so we're going to move on. Or set things aside. We parking lot stuff and mental health first aid, but you can always say, I'd be happy to talk with you after the presentation about that, because that's and answer your questions, I know it's important to you. The last thing about engaging audience is humor is great as long as it doesn't hurt anybody and links to the material. So most of the time when I'm doing a presentation and I use any humor, it's self-directed. So I make fun of myself sometimes. So we were doing a youth mental health first aid class Saturday, and we were doing a demonstration of a panic attack, and Brendan always gets to play the youth because I say most youth aren't gray-haired and bald. So, see? I got a laugh. And it just helps people feel comfortable, but you don't necessarily want to make fun of folks at any point in time. But you can use humor, and it's fine, even for heavy topics at times. We don't use humor when we're talking about suicide. We may use humor when we're just talking about different things related to the community and things like that. The other thing about telling stories, I tend to tell a lot of stories, and just, there's an acronym that we use about telling stories, and it's Brian, and you may need to help me remember this, but the B is for brief, the R is for it relates to the content.
Relevant.
It's relevant, it's brief, it's relevant. The Y is that you can tell it emotionally, meaning that, for example, there's a story I tell because I've lost a family member to suicide, and some days I can tell it without it making my voice crack, and some days I can't. It just kind of depends on where you're at. You can tell it emotionally, and what's the N for? It's brief and relevant to the material, and that you can tell it emotionally. Oh, and you have permission. If it's about somebody else, now if I stood up here and said, my 30 years of being a clinician, I've had this client who was it doesn't reflect well upon me as somebody who's really good at keeping someone's confidentiality, even if I've removed any identifying information. So if I tend to tell stories about individuals, I really make a point of either asking them. So for example, my grandmother passed away, had a pretty serious anxiety disorder, and I've had a long discussion with my mom about how one of the ways of honoring her memory is by using that as a teaching tool in class. And she's given full permission. And it was really helpful because it took about 5 years for her to get treated, which is about half the national average. Actually, we talk about the median length is 10 years. But it's a good story, and it's a teaching to the material. All right, let's keep rolling here. So I just wanted to go through some of the approved templates that UMSL has on the website. You can use these if you're doing a presentation that's not related to MIMH. We tend to use this one. There it is. That's got the thing at the bottom. See, there's a typo there because I missed putting the graphic on the other 2 slides, and I bet somebody already noticed that who's really good at this kind of stuff. So this one, I don't know, I've never seen it. Yeah,
I've never seen them.
they're on the website as the approved. Yeah, this is kind of like watercolor university, true colors. I don't know.
It's kind of Millennium students.
Yeah, there's this one, which, red writing on a blue screen, so I wouldn't have to use this one. It is contradictory to what we've just been teaching. There's the one we used for MIMH, which is much better than the original one we had, which was a big yellow stripe and a big red stripe, and it was a little retinal scarring, if you want to say that. So I'm going to take this minute to answer any questions. I tend to end with cartoons. This is one of my favorites too, actually. So I'll take any questions and I'll immediately begin backpedaling. So I think it's relevant to what's going on. Oh, which reminds me, I work really hard, despite the way I act at work, to not bring politics into the discussion, because it's really hard not to say things like, the people at the CDC are not being allowed to use words like evidence and stuff like that. So objecting or inserting your own opinions into the content sometimes can be really risky. So, questions?
So you do practice presentations?
I do.
Stuff like-
I do.
So Rob says he dresses up in the clothes he's going to wear.
I don't do that, and I think it's probably because of just general experience. I taught at Mizzou for 2 years in the School of Social Work, the Graduate School of Social Work, and then did assist for 5 years, and then prior to that did nonviolent physical crisis intervention for several years, and then been doing mental health first aid for a number of years. So I feel like the general presentation stuff is, okay. It's just the timing and knowing the material. And I still, both Rachel and I, she's better than me actually when it comes to presenting, because there's still times that I carry around my teaching notes, and I've done probably close to 50 classes now. So it just takes time and practice.
That way, if you bought a new shirt and it turns out to be itchy, it would be good to know that ahead of time, so you're not after your presentation.
Exactly what you said?
I said, we were talking about Rob
Oh.
sitting dressed up in the clothes that he's gonna wear for the presentation.
I don't remember scratching during this
No,
presentation.
no.
See, we weren't going to say anything yet, but it's a little distracting.
Yeah.
No.
Pulling at it that would be distracting.
Um,
A couple of other things, I tend to I hate podiums. They're just, even with large groups of people, one, I'm a little too antsy to stand in the same place. But other kind of common mistakes I've seen new instructors and new presenters do is plant themselves in one spot, even though it may not be behind a podium, and never move. And I like to actually get out with the group and engage in the audience a little bit. Actually, it's one of the things we did at our wedding. When we did our vows, we came down into the middle between all the people because we wanted our family and friends closest to us at the time. Now I am going to get emotional. But that was important to us because it really makes that connection, and I think that's important to having a positive learning experience for somebody. Now, I've also seen people who've stood at the back of the room and clicked the slides and talked. It's Chris's sister is who it is. I wasn't doing her evaluation at the time, and she's like, yeah, I know, I told her about it. That's not good either. So move around, connect with people, and it gives you a chance to, for me too, being someone who has hearing that's over 50 years old, it's helpful for me to hear people's questions a little better when I'm closer to them also. Any other, Brendan, any words of wisdom you want to add?
I don't think so. I think to the point of practicing, I found that if you actually say what you're going to say out loud, then you figure out what sounds good. So even if you're sitting in a room by yourself, saying your presentation out loud, I think that's an effective way to figure out where some of the flaws are in your presentation.
It's just like reading your paper out loud while you're editing. It really helps.
Did you talk about ums at all?
I did not, but you raise a very good point. Now, we tend, when we train new instructors, not to talk about ums, but we do corporate feedback, meaning that when someone's done their presentation piece, the group gives feedback, and we use a stop, start, continue model, meaning what should you continue doing? Continue smiling, continue walking around, continue engaging people who are having good energy. What should you start doing? Start moving around. What should you stop doing? Ums come up a lot. And that tends to happen. And people don't oftentimes really notice what the number of ums that they're saying. Now, Betty Kitchener, who teaches mental health, who created mental health first aid, will sit in the back of the room, from what I'm told, and actually count the number of ums. But
Oh, really?
we don't do that with folks, but we'll bring it up if it's an issue. Everybody has their kind of filler words. Mine tends to be well and so. So it's awareness oftentimes. So if you're interested in terms of a presentation of something that's really important for a really important group, not only should you do it out loud, but you can record yourself and suffer the embarrassment of listening to it, because everyone hates the sound of their own voice. But generally, yeah. But it can be really helpful in terms of you helping to remove some of the filler words that could be potentially distracting. It's a good point, Liz. Thank you.
There's also several articles out there that talk about filler words in ways that you can A, figure out when you're using them, and B, different ways that you can either fill in those blanks with not or not like, and then you're more mindful of that. So there's some different articles out there in the world. One is 4 ways to stop saying which for me was fairly effective while teaching mental health first aid and doing other presentations. So there's resources out there for that too.
Okay, we're at 12:37, and I feel like we should move on and let Kelly talk.
Thank you for keeping us on track.
All right,
Thank you for
let's switch out
presenting.
this. Thanks, Ed.
Much appreciated.
Let me switch out this handy dandy device that's going to project it to the TV for us. Oops. There we go. So I'm going to break some of these things that Ed just presented, so just to set myself up a little bit. But that also has to do with what I'm presenting, so it's not all about having to break rules, but they will be broken. Let's see if we can see if it's going to jump on. Oh! So I'm glad you're all here to stay, and let's see if this is going to, okay, good. It's connecting, and I know you all want to know how to make a killer podcast. So if you're going to make a killer podcast, I got 3 things up here on the screen. Which one would you pick first to do if you're making your killer podcast?
think you would have to come up with your idea before.
An
you-
idea? How interesting. That's a fantastic way to start, I think. An idea. So you might have a comedy. Maybe you'll have a true story to talk about. And then maybe you'll have a stream of consciousness. What of those three do you guys think you'd like? Anybody listen to any podcasts at all? Anybody know what a podcast is? Raise hands. Anna, you have no idea?
Mhm.
You don't know what a podcast is? Really? Does anybody want to tell them what a podcast is? Besides me?
I think we should yield to the youngest person in the room to do this.
I actually don't listen to podcasts, but.
Oh, that's a better question. How many people actually listen to podcasts?
Sometimes I have the hard time telling
Oh, I
the
do.
difference
Yeah.
between that
Okay.
and just like streaming something.
Well, let me throw it out there and we'll see if we can help Anna with this definition. So, a podcast is basically like a radio program, but it's on the internet. And it doesn't have necessarily a start and end time like a radio program. And it can be on any subject. And anyone can make one. And that's why we have these little things. So there's just some ideas. So we're going to make our podcast. Let's say, you don't have to pick from these three, but what would your subject matter be? What's your idea? Throw an idea out there.
Dog walking.
Dog walking? All right.
That's when I listen to podcasts.
But what would your podcast be about? About dog walking?
Yeah.
Okay, so how to walk a dog. Very good. So this is going to be the dog walking podcast. All right, so next, what do you think? So we've got our idea. What do we need to think about next for our killer podcast on dog walking?
Are you going to record it?
You think that's next?
I'd say delivery.
Delivery? Anybody else? We're going to get a vote on this? Vote for delivery or recording?
I would think like once I have an idea, I would think about how to present, how to sell this idea. You know?
Okay. So you're going delivery route or, okay.
Delivery.
That's what I would say too, because that's what's next on this line, right? Delivery. So you can deliver it. Since it is generally an audio format, there are vidcasts. They're also called podcasts, which is very confusing for people. But most of the time it's audio. So you can do your social media stuff, and there's a bunch of different ones there. Does anybody know what all those little logos mean? Just now.
Most of them.
Facebook. I'm going to use the laser pointer. Although it won't work on here, will it?
No, it
doesn't
goes
want to.
blank.
Is the brown one Snapchat?
Yeah, the middle one is.
Yeah, Snapchat, Pinterest, Vimeo, LinkedIn, Twitter. And then you can also do a website, perhaps. So just about any website you want to make. Or there are podcast networks. Which question?
So you said you can make a website?
Sure.
Okay, so that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, we'll get into that. That's a separate topic. So then, or you can get a podcast network, right? So let's look at social media. There's all the ones we listed off there. How many people are on social media? How many of these do you have? Let's say, hold up your fingers. How many social media networks are you involved in? 2, 5, 1.
Wow.
None? Anna? None? Why? All right, so websites, there's several free websites as well as paid websites. WordPress.com is an easy free website you can put your podcast on. Wix.com, another one you can do for free. Squarespace costs you a little money, but with that money you get the freedom of ease, shall we say, of making a website, and Weebly as well. So podcast networks, a lot of them, I know that this is all new to you, Anna, since you didn't know what a podcast was, but there's several out there that you can join and just have your audio podcast on one of these networks. You don't even need anything else. So then that brings us to recording method. So it's really easy to record. Everybody have a smartphone? How many people have smartphones? Everybody? Pretty much. You can record on your smartphone, right? So let's see. Just about anybody can do it. Let's do this real quick. So I'm going to put Claire on the spot. Introduce your dog walking podcast. Just speak, say, hi, this is Claire.
Hi, this is Claire, and today we're going to talk about dog walking.
There you go.
That was worthy, thank you.
That was
I
wordy.
know.
So we recorded something?
Hi, this is Claire, and today we're going to talk about dog walking.
That was easy, wasn't it? Now the other thing you can do, Oop, we don't want to hear that, it's something different. And you can also buy a standalone recorder like a Zoom H1, which is a little recorder, very easy to use. Obviously you can see there's a record button right there in the center. But it's not your phone, just in case you want to take phone calls, I guess, while you're recording. Or you can also use your laptop. Most laptops nowadays have a camera and a microphone, and you can just record on that. So that's how you make a killer podcast. You combine those three things, and you'll have a killer podcast. Let's listen to one that I happen to know about. Let's see what we got. Hey everybody, welcome to the Prezi Cast. This is Kelly, but remember this is our inaugural episode, the first Prezi Cast ever. I'm so enthralled with it, I just needed to talk about it. Prezi, you know, was invented in 2009 by Adam Somali Fisher and Peter Halsey, and they're both from Budapest, Hungary, believe it or not. Adam made this zooming presentation prototype that he was using to make show off his media art pieces. And Peter Halsey was an engineer. He thought that was really kind of neat, so he helped him improve it. And then they were joined a little bit later by Peter Algre, who wanted to turn this whole idea into a business. They incorporated on May 20th, 2009, and received their first major investment from TED. That's right, the TED of TED Talks, 2 months later. So then in November of that same year, they opened their office in San Francisco and hired somebody. So the company is in Hungary and in San Francisco. So then in 2011, they had an iPad app. In 2012, they made an iPhone app, and they got $14 million in Series B venture capital from Excel Partners in order to kind of keep the whole thing going. And in March 2014, they pledged $100 million in free licenses to Title I schools as part of the Obama administration's Connect Ed program. And that was pretty popular. So a lot of schools got it. So the idea is they wanted to build their base. So if our kids in school, just like Microsoft did with PowerPoint, then they'll just use it into the future. So they also got some more funding from Excel Partners and Spectrum Equity, $57 million to be exact. And that helped them launch Prezi on the Android in 2015. And then they started up in 2016 a thing called Prezi Business. It's for sales and marketing folks who want to do presentations to sell stuff and whatnot. In April 2017, Prezi Next came about. It's a new HTML5 based product that is going to be the next step for Prezi. But today, we're going to talk about the regular Prezi, the free Prezi. Stay tuned. And now we'll hear from our sponsor, Prezi. Obviously, if you want to do presentations, Prezi's the way to go. Prezi's got multiple packages. The basic package is free. It gives you unlimited presentations. For $19 a month, you can get the Plus package, which includes privacy control, revocable shared links, offline access, portable presentations, interview, voiceover, and export to PDFs. Of course, you may need a little bit more than that, so you're going to get the premium package for $59 a month. That includes all those things, plus Prezi Analytics, advanced online training, and phone support. Now, I know in our audience we have a lot of people that work in education. If you have a valid EDU address, you can get EDU Standard, which is a free plan that gives you unlimited presentations, privacy control, revocable shared links. Now, if you want to pay $7 a month, you can get the EDU Plus plan, which includes all those things, plus offline access, portable presentations, presenter view, voiceover, export to PDF, video upload. And then if you have an EDU Teams package, which doesn't have a price on here, but you can look into it, you get all those things plus video upload, Prezi Analytics, and advanced online training and phone support. So Prezi is for all your presentation needs. All you need to do is go to Prezi. So the whole idea was that was all made with Prezi, right? So you guys, no one stopped me to say, well, what are you talking about, Kelly? We don't have killer podcasts as a topic. It's Prezi as a topic.
We talked about it.
You were thinking that, but you didn't mention it. So you're all very polite. You're way too polite, and you should have said something earlier.
We're interested, I wrote that.
So yeah, the whole previous thing about podcasts was just to show off some of the things you can do, and the static on the audio, unfortunately, was just because of this wireless setup. So, but Prezi, it is an interesting thing, but it already breaks rules that I agree with, and that Ed mentioned in his previous topic, which is don't make it too much animation and so forth. So keep that in mind. That's like a little bit of a caveat on my part, because I totally agree with that it's totally distracting. But that's really part of what this product does, is it moves through things. And that's what it's designed for, and that's what happens. So it's very visual, and you can use the templates that it comes with. You can use a motif. So for instance, I took a picture of a switcher, and so each one of the buttons on the switcher I can make active on another Prezi presentation to use that as my motif for a presentation. So if I was going to talk about something, I could say, and then click this button and it would move forward and so forth. You can do things non-linearly. I'm doing them linearly here for today, but if you wanted to, and you could sit at your laptop, you could do them non-linearly and just click on things and have them appear on the screen. And then also a story. So for instance, I took this picture, and you could make segments of that picture active, like links, and you just click on them and they would bring forth information. So you can kind of think of things a little bit differently than you do in PowerPoint. PowerPoint is much more linear and also much more of a controlled environment. This is a little bit more open. So templates. Prezi has a bunch of templates. I'll just give you a little bit of a sample here. I just scrolled through all the templates and made a screen cap of it. And they're in all these different areas. So there's marketing, education, general use. Let's see what other one goes by here. Business planning, business model. But you can see there's probably over 100 and some templates that you can choose from. Most people who use Prezi are going to use one of these templates, which are really quite nice. And those are all also available for the free side. So next thing is you think about is whenever you're doing your Prezi, you have your visual, so you're going to pick your template, you're going to pick your motif or your story, and now you want to incorporate media. So you can incorporate text, you can incorporate images. I thought that was a really nice image of a shoe. I don't know why, but there's books in the background. I thought that was really quite neat and interesting. And then you can also do video. Specifically for the free version of Prezi is YouTube. So, and that's what a lot of folks do, is they embed YouTubes into their presentations, and it's really easy to do with this. So, let's look at text. So there's 5 preset styles with over 50 fonts of text. So if we're comparing it to PowerPoint, you can kind of have infinite number of fonts. You can what I would call sideload fonts into Prezi, but it's not an easy process, and it's not available, I don't believe, to the free people, the person who gets it for free. They're sizable. You can do custom colors. Obviously, you can do bullet lists and animations. Images, if we look, there's a little asterisk next to chart. If you want to do charts in Prezi that are Prezi charts and not just images, so charts that would be with motion, you have to pay. You can import any pictures. There's shapes, there's arrows, there's lines, there's icons, there's symbols. All that good kind of stuff's all part of the free Prezi package. Again, now we're getting into more paid areas. So if you want to upload audio or video, you have to have a paid package unless it's going to be through YouTube. So far what I've done is I created YouTube videos, uploaded them, got my link, and I'm able to play them inside here. But if you wanted to do that just off your desktop with something, it would be a little more difficult without paying. So, presenting. This is where it kind of is really interesting, and this is another rule that I broke from what Ed mentioned before, but I I probably should, Anna took my little note sheet over there. I don't need it. But I probably should just printed that out and gave it to you. But people do like to get things. They want to have something. They want to have something in front of them so that they can take notes on it or whatever. With this, everything is online, and so it really does not lend itself to doing handouts because it's not easily printable. So because you're flying through things and jumping into things, there's not really an easy way to print things out. But you can do something. I did a little thing there. Just as a few reminders for myself. So you do it live, so what you do is like what I'm doing right here, you just do present. It's live on the screen and you go through it. You can do it online, so you can make a link, and with that link you can go look at it at a later time, so it's just like a link on a website, but it's in a format that Prezi has that you go out there so you can watch it that way. Or if you want to pay, you can share it via Facebook, download it as a PDF, or download it as a portable Prezi file, and then that way you'll be able to take it. So this breaks another rule, which is backup, backup, backup. The only way you're going to back this up currently is, if you don't pay, is via making another link, but you'll still have to have online access, or you pay to be able to download as a PDF or in a Prezi format. So it's not, you have to be connected, so it doesn't make it quite as nice as other things, to where you can feel assured that you're going to be able to present. So that's one of the things we run into. At conferences, as people want to do Prezi, we're at the hotel, you only have hotel Wi-Fi. Hotel Wi-Fi doesn't work, you don't have a presentation. So keep that in mind. I mentioned all the pricing and so forth. Just to reiterate, it is free, and if you have an EDU, you get some aspects of that. A better package, I suppose, for the free than you would if you were a regular person. So, but if you want to pay $7 a month, you can get most of the features in Prezi as an EDU subscriber.
So it's not one the university kind of routinely has on their list of available software? So.
No, but let's see here. Let's check back in on the podcast, and let's see what else the PreziCast has to say. Hey everyone, thank you for joining me today. I want to leave you with just a few pros and cons about Prezi. The pros are that it's free, and that's a fantastic thing. Especially with an EDU address, you can get more features for nothing. It's visually interesting. It's easily shared online. It's a constantly updated piece of software because it is online. It's always being updated. They're making new improvements. You can use it on an iPad and an iPhone if you want to. And it's fun. I mean, let's be real about it. It's really fun to do. PowerPoint's kind of boring. It's kind of fun. Some of the cons, though, cons for some of the good features. You can't do upload audio, video, do the charts and so forth without paying a price. Again, you can't get a substantial discount if you have an EDU address. All that flying around with on the screen can make people kind of queasy in the audience, so you want to make sure you keep that in mind as you're making your presentation. You have to pay to save offline, and so we can't back up very easily. So with it being hard to back up, you may not like that so much. And then you're locked into the platform, and so it's kind of bad because you get locked into Prezi. But so if you have a PowerPoint, you can make it a PDF, or you can make it JPEGs or PNGs or something else. With Prezi, you got Prezi. You can get a PDF if you pay for it, which is good, but not so good if you don't want to shell out the cash. And I'm going to leave you one last thing. I made a Prezi back in February of 2013. It's called Presentation Tips, and you can find it at training.com/presentation-tips. mimhtraining.com/presentation-tips. It's a neat little Prezi that I made, over 5 years now. Go figure. Hope you tune in for the next show. See you then. All right, any questions?
Kelly, what did you say to get it downloadable? How much was that?
$7 a month if you have an EDU address and you sign up that way.
So if you're gonna do a presentation
Mm-hmm.
and you want it like spring institute,
Right.
you wanna make sure it's downloadable, can
Right.
you do $7.99 and then stop it for a month?
I believe you can. I think that you set up a recurring charge, and so then you'd have to cancel it, but you could do that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if they do a discount if you do the whole year or not. They might, but
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't look into that. So. But if you want to look at the interface here, let's see. Just behind the scenes a little bit. Let's see if we can edit this. But it really is set up very much like PowerPoint on the back end, but it is a little different in the sense that it does want you to have that fluid motion throughout. So that's the idea behind it, is always moving forward or moving in or moving out. So a lot of templates are set up. Like this one's just, I just made this really quick, I think off of one of the templates and deleted a bunch of stuff to make it real simple. But you have the 3 circles, and I just moved from the circles, and so this is all the way out, that's all the way in. Just, let me see here.
So you just advanced through that by just hitting the forward button
Right.
on your clicker?
And the clicker, yeah.
So you set it up in that order prior to?
Correct. You set it up in that order. You can change the order. It's pretty simple to do. But you can be non-linear. I'll open up the tips thing that I have because it's actually a little bit more. No, the old version wants Flash, so I can't open that up. Sorry, I don't have Flash on this.
So does it work with a touch screen where each one
Yeah,
is
so you
on the
could-
button?
You could actually everything is so. Like for instance, if I wanted to, I can go to Present here, and I can click and jump into things.
Okay.
And then if you want to jump back out, you can click back here. Or you can just step through it this way too.
Okay.
So you can make it nonlinear. I don't have this one set up as nonlinear as you can, but you could set up everything as just basically clickable links and then move in and move out of the items you wanted to. So it could be a very nonlinear talk if you wanted to.
Meaning you can go back and forth?
Mhm. So like I can just click here
Present to media.
and jump into media.
Yeah, just like the weather guy in the maps.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then go through and I'll follow through here. I could say, oh wait, I want to look over here at texts. I jump into text,
Mhm.
then I can jump back out. And let's say, oh, we'll jump back into images rather than going
So
back
that's the,
to,
like I said, feature.
yeah.
Mhm.
Or jump all the way out. So it can be, but then you'd have to have something more than a clicker if you're going to do that, because you'll have to have some type of mouse control. Or if you do have the Prezi app, you could do it off of your phone and then just touch items on your phone.
Oh, really?
But you'd have to have some way to get via Chromecast or AirPlay on Apple to get over to the monitor or the projector. So it's a little more complicated, a little more risk of failure since it's not solid. Kind of like I had a failure with my audio here because it sounded all crackly. It doesn't sound that bad on the thing, so it's because of this interface. So always best to go direct if you can.
Yeah, I'm also noticing as you move the circles around, there's some ghost images.
That's on here.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's on the connection to the television.
yeah.
Yeah.
But, so if you were.
Otherwise,
going-
it would be smooth.
Yeah, if you were going someplace to present,
Mhm.
you don't know what kind of.
Right.
You end up with static and ghost there too.
Correct. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Shiny.
You guys are all too polite. Somebody should have stopped me when I said killer podcast.
No, I thought we were here to learn about Prezi.
That's right.
I'm a little slow on
That's
that
all right.
response.
I was just thinking it would be cool, because I'm not that visual,
Mhm.
but to like work with you,
Mhm.
maybe before a presentation, so I could, I mean, there's somewhere in there to get the
Yeah, I mean,
ideas for how that stuff can pop out interestingly, which kind of feeds into some of
I usually, a lot of times, and that's why, and I brought up here in the, like under visual here, template motif or story, and so that's, it kind of depends on how fast you gotta churn stuff out and how, creative or, what you think your audience can handle as well. So, like today we essentially did a little story, because you actually got two things in one. You got learn how to do a podcast and you can learn about Prezi, right? So the story was how to do a podcast and then pulled you in to do Prezi. So I think if you have the time and you can do that, it kind of makes your presentation a little more memorable. And even though I'm not a very good presenter, you may remember it a little bit better because it was a little different and it wasn't the same old, and so, and we talked about this the other day in our meeting, to me, having seen a lot of people over the years give presentations, it really boils down to the person. Like Ed has a very nice, easygoing style. Is it okay if I pick on you, Ed?
Sure. No, I'm always
and I'm not going to pick on you in that sense. I'm complimenting you, but and I think that style goes over well with people as opposed to I'm a little more nervous and jittery, and so that's off-putting to people unless you can overcome that a little bit. So most of the time, to me, even though I work in this median and so forth, the presentation itself really has very little to do with how you leave that session feeling. It almost always has to do with the person presenting or the people presenting. You can kind of tweak it if you have a really nice presentation, but they're always that human interaction is what's always going to stick. Always going to stick. And so if you don't have enough of that, then it won't be potentially as well received. So, but Ed, you did agree.
Thanks. You just reminded me of one of the words of wisdoms that we often give to presenters too, is that unless the audience has seen your presentation before, they have no idea what you were supposed to say. So if you happen to miss a point and then circle back around and weave it into the conversation later on, they are none the worse for the wear. So, as long as you cover the material that you want to cover, sometimes the order is important, but, as long as you're not nervous and don't panic and you just kind of roll with it, you're able to bring stuff back in and everybody thinks you did a great job. So,
And that gets to be personable and get to be smooth. How else would you use? What other adjectives would you use? Smooth, calm, knowledgeable, all those things. Because again, you're right. They don't know what you're going to present. So whatever you put out there is what they thought you were going to present, and however you do it is the way they thought you were going to do it. So very good.
I just love the experiences when you see you see the light bulbs go off. That's like one of the most rewarding experiences in the world in any kind of teaching, is when you're talking to a group and you kind of see them go, oh, because you see the little kind of go, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a charge. So anyway, that's the intrinsic reward.
There you go. So you've got all kinds of interesting do's and don'ts for presentations, as well as a possible piece of software you might want to use. And I would say, depending on what you're doing, if I had to give my what do you want to call it, synopsis for Prezi, I would say that it really depends on what you're presenting and who your audience is, whether you want to use it or not. It's not for everybody to use everywhere. I think they want it to be that way, obviously, because they're trying to sell stuff. But some people in some settings just want a PowerPoint, and so don't overdo it. Don't overshoot. And you just give them what they want, and they'll be happy with it. But if you have something that you want to do, I would say if anything is really dense, I wouldn't use this, even though you can. I think the lighter and the shorter it is, this is really nice. But the more dense and longer,
I was thinking things that were very text heavy or graphics heavy might get a little busy, but
yeah. And you can do all this flying and everything. I didn't even do that much, but I mean, some of them really, it's like you're going through the Grand Canyon on the back of an eagle. So you don't want to do that.
I was going to say, like you're on a roller coaster. That's a lot more visual.
anyhow,
If
but,
you have some data in there, but then you want to kind of get the audience at the beginning,
yeah.
can you embed your charts then from,
Yeah, no, you can embed them as pictures.
as pictures?
Right, but you can do if you were to pay is they'll grow and you can fly into them and go follow
Pictures
them.
themselves,
The charts themselves.
yeah.
So you can start out where everything's leveled off and it'll be like, dee, 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 and then everything goes, you can zoom into the top of one to the top of another.
Okay,
Right.
so like the animation function in
Yeah.
PowerPoint.
Sort of, I think
Kinda
we're
a
just
little
talking
more
about, you can
robust.
say, okay, here's our baseline data, and if you fast forward 6 months, you can have the chart totally change
Right.
and morph into what it looks like at 6 months, or if we project this out for another year, this is what our sales data is gonna look like, and you see the gradual growth of it, where with PowerPoint, it's gonna be a static picture.
Right,
rather than
you'll dissolve
second
in the
static
next
picture.
thing, or you'll
Yeah.
flip into it, or whatever the other ones that people use. But it's not gonna be this steady, kinda like this was, where you're moving in and moving out. Not on the screen necessarily, but fairly smoothly, whenever you're doing things. So, we talk about data visualization, and I haven't gotten to actually use Prezi in that mode because no one's ever paid for it, so.
Right.
But if, my guess is it would be something that would be neat for data visualization, yes.
Yeah, right, that's where the schools are at.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday on other meetings, but I've used it in the past, like I said, I've had an account for over 5 some years, and I've used it for little things here and there, but I don't actually present that often, to be honest with you, so. One of the last
It'd be kind of cool
presentations.
to take like a PowerPoint and then say, okay, somebody making this in the present.
Yeah.
See how they do that.
Yeah.
Because we have tons of PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, and if you heard at the very beginning, whenever I switched into our podcast to listen to it, the very first people that invested in this was the TED Talks. So, you guys, everybody watches those online and whatnot. And that's because those are, 15-minute talks that have very few slides, and they want things to visually move, and they're visually interesting, so. I
Well,
think
those
that's
are
the
ones
reason.
where the person really makes the difference too.
Yeah.
Correct.
A lot of
It's a
times,
story.
there's very little, if anything.
Exactly.
It's just them talking.
But this kind of thing works probably really well in those kind of settings.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, time's up, we're over
This is what
time.
happens when you shoot a Tesla Roadster into
Thank you.
space.
Thanks. Well, if anybody has questions or want to talk more about it, I'll be happy to, so.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for coming. So we're gonna try and do a brown bag for professional development every couple of months. So if anybody has suggestions for what to talk about, if anybody would like to present, please let me know.
Sounds good.
Yeah, using our internal resources, that was great.
Mhm.
And I don't know what you mean, Kel, about not being able to present, you just did an excellent job there.
No, I'm a little jittery and,
It wasn't coming across
It wasn't.
We've seen much worse.
Oh my god. There are sometimes.
Yeah, they-
Oh, yeah, it's a-
presenters who just all of a sudden decide to skip 10 slides into the future and
We're like presenters who paid $2,000 for this class. And you're like, I don't know why Zoom.
We have
Yeah.
Terrible presenter.
baseline bar.
honestly, the worst presenters are PhDs, no offense, Liz. When they're trying to present someone else's material because they never want to present someone else's content. In terms of like teachers, people who do a PhD teaching, never like when it comes to mental health first aid, never want to use our like learning lesson plan because they always think they know better. Which is why there's a knockoff version of mental health first aid in Columbia by one of the faculty who was originally part of the project. I think what knockoff ripoff?
Rip
I
off.
say stolen.
Yeah. So
Is that the same one that's on campus though? isn't it?
yeah, respond.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met her. We did some stuff together when the name was still around. But
Yeah.
no, the point is they never want to. What's the word I'm looking for? Not kind of rubric, lesson plan. They just curriculum. That's thank you.
Curriculum.
Yeah. So we've seen. Yeah. Well, and we've certainly had. What was the one?